Alrighty, welcome back to another thrilling installment of Mecha Mondays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Pilot Fraggeth, and today we are reading the final installment of Lethal Heritage, first of the Blood of Kerensky trilogy. I still do not have copies of the second and third volumes, so I don't know when we're going to get to those. Someday we'll get to those. But I have to get them and read them first. Well, actually, I just have to get them. I'm okay with reading them blind. That's not a problem or a deal breaker. Oh, that's right. I need to get up that info page on the word of Blake, because I said I was going to do that. What is sorta done that? Yeah. Word of Blake. There we go. That should be enough. Oh, technically this is, what is... Okay, so Word of Blake hasn't actually happened yet, but they do have a Blakeism thing. Here we go, that's fine. That's not terribly helpful. I just have to be cautious because I don't want to necessarily do spoilers for subsequent books. Because I remember there's like a big... here we go, that's probably good enough. No, that's... Give me a sec here. I remember the big, there's a Word of Blake jihad that occurs later on. Way later on, like 50 in-game years down the road. This is all too far down. I've in fact strongly considered reading the pre-Disney Star Wars novels, C.W. Nicholson. I've actually done some. I read the Tale of IG-88. I think, therefore, I am. I think that's the title of the story. It's the Tale of IG-88 from Tales of the Bounty Hunters, which is one of my personal favorites. I remember reading that and being like, oh my goodness, this is wild. That one's fun. That's old, though. That's way back in my history. Tell you what, I'm going to leave this page up and I will look for it after we're done reading. I'm going to figure it out because this is all stuff that's after, like immediately after this time period, and this is not really what I want to be dealing with. Come on, where is... Okay, that is helpful. Okay, I can work with this. I'm not going to worry about it right now. So previously on, where did we cut off last week, or where did we start last week? All right, so the big stuff that happened last week is that various factions in the Inner Sphere have successfully warded off attacks by clan invasion forces. One example of this comes in the form of what the patriarch of House Kurita and leader of the Draconis Combine manages to carry off with his son, as well as Shin Yodama and others, where they basically lure Clan Smoke Jaguar into performing an attack and then using their culture against them. So Hohiro Kurita is like, hey, we want to fight you honorably. That's important to you. That's important to us. So we will give you a list of the forces that we can muster and use against you. and you can match accordingly what we're going to do. Uh, and then he's like, the Smoke Jaguar commander is like, okay. Um, and then Hohiro says, well, we'll do that, but we will do that under the condition that we get a prize if we win. And that prize comes in the form of a number of battle mechs as well as a number of clan battle mechs, as well as a number of the elementals. I forget what the Kuritas keep calling them. Some people call them toads, some people call them other things, but the elementals, which are powered armor, infantry-sized powered armor. Um, and House Kurita is like, okay, or Hohiro Kurita is like, okay, cool. After the Smoke Jaguar accepts and proceeds to choose the time and place for the engagement and wastes them. They get absolutely shellacked. Um, uh, and the guy is like, okay, you now have to kill me though, because you've I made such a massive tactical blunder in allowing you to choose the time and place of the confrontation, and he knows that he got lured into a trap, which he was, and he's like, you gotta kill me. He's like, we're not going to do that. That's barbaric. Um, so that guy, one of his underlings kills him right in front of him, and they're like, "Wow, these guys are nuts, dude. these guys are crazy, man. What's wrong with these dudes?" But they still get the battle mechs. I forget how many it is. It's not a lot of battle mechs, but it's enough to work with. As well as a bunch of the elemental power armor. On in another part of the galaxy, Victor Steiner Davion's plan is to throw off Clan Jade Falcon is really shaky. It has a shaky start and it almost all implodes, but Kai Allard Liao is able to not so much defend the pass as he's able to blow the pass up. Um, Admittedly, at the sacrifice of a lot of people. And so Kai is like, well, I ordered these men to die. I can never be allowed to be put into that position again because I'm not worthy, because I have self-esteem issues of the massive sort. Um, and then, of course, to add insult to injury, it turns out that Dierdre Lear, the nice doctor lady who has serious beef with him because Kai's father killed killed her father. Um, so they're not exactly doing well in their relationship, as it were. So that's why she doesn't like him very much. The other thing that's going down is that the Clan Wolf JumpShip has shown up in some system. I don't remember which system. Um, at Radstadt province, apparently, um, and is under attack. So we've got right now we ended fairly dramatically with Tyra. Tyra, that's her name? Yes, Tyra, the former fling of Felon Kell, basically doing a suicide attack, or about to do a suicide attack, on the Direwolf's bridge. And that is where we will pick up when we get started in about 10 to 30 seconds. I just need to get some water in me real quick. Chapter 41, Jump Ship Direwolf, Nadir Jump Point, Radstadt Province, Free Rasselhag Republic. 31 October, 3050. Felon Kell and the Pre-Center Marshal raced down the corridor toward the Dire Wolf's bridge. Hot on the heels of their escort, they had to use a service ladder to get down from the observation deck, forcing them to head away from the bridge before they could reach it. As they sprinted down the last 30 meters to the bridge, the whole jump ship lurched as though struck by some godling's hammer. Felon stumbled forward, but tucked himself into a roll to absorb the energy. His guide slammed into a corridor wall and smacked his head hard. He slipped to the deck, and the Pre-Center Marshal slid nose up into him. Jesus Christ, what was that? Felon shook himself as he unfolded his body and braced for a second impact or subsidiary explosion. He glanced over at the Pre-Center Marshal. You all right? Vogt reseated his eye patch and nodded. Yes, but our guide isn't. What happened? Felon shrugged as he crawled back to the man's unconscious form. He plucked the radio from his belt and flicked it open. Damage control, get a team up here to the bridge. We have a problem. And get a medical team up here, too.
Who is this? Are you calling from the bridge?
Unbridled terror made the words crackle from the radio. No, I'm in the corridor outside the bridge. Something exploded in there or hit it. The repair tech's oath shouted from the radio.
Freebirth! Something opened a hole in the hull! The automatic systems are sealing it, but we have atmosphere loss. Teams are on the way. Medical, too.
The mercenary looked up at the Pre-Center Marshal and shook his head. If you have atmosphere loss, bring up EVA suits and extra oxygen gear. The damage control officer's voice calmed considerably.
Confirmed, Commander. On the way.
Vogt smiled warily. Commander, that's quite a promotion. The Kell Hound ignored the irony and concentrated on the greater... Okay. The Kell Hound ignored the irony and concentrated on the greater significance of his promotion. Damn, most of the Dire Wolf's senior officers were on the bridge. These clansmen don't take well to surprises, and they're always looking for orders from the folks above them. That's why this clown calls me a commander, because I was giving him orders. He looked up at the one-eyed Comstar man. Who's going to be giving orders to the folks who are supposed to keep us in one piece? Before Vogt could answer, the damage control team arrived. Felon thrust the radio into the Pre-Center Marshal's hands. See if you can raise run on this thing. Tell her we need to know who's in charge, and if she can't come up with a good answer, tell her she's it. He hesitated. That is, unless you want the job. Vogt smiled warily. I think, Felon Kell, that you have assumed that position already. The mercenary laughed harshly. Fine. Then consider this delegation of authority. See what can be done. Felon turned and crossed to where a clan tech had hitched up a piece of diagnostic equipment to the sonic lock beside the bridge's closed doors.
Freebirth!
What's the problem?
The bridge has been sealed, and we have minimal atmosphere.
The tech replied distractedly.
And I have not a clue how long the hull seal will hold. There is a savagery short in the electrical systems. The door has given itself a new combination code, and I do not know what it is. It was just chosen at random, and if things are still alive in there, it could change again at a moment's notice.
The Kell Hound nodded. How many digits? The clansman frowned in irritation.
What difference does it make?
The felon grabbed the man by his collar and hoisted him off the ground. Give me an answer, idiot! People may still be alive in there!
9!
Felon dropped him and pulled the electronic lockpick from his pocket. He tossed it to the tech. Set the switches to 9 and hold it against the lock plate. He turned to one of the other damage control team members. Give me one of those EVA suits. I go in first. The Ilkhan and Khan Ulrich were on the bridge. Find them and get them out to medical facilities immediately. Then we pull out any other people we can find. The clansmen nodded and prepared their equipment as Felon pulled on the jumpsuit and sealed the ankles and wrists. They're so conditioned to take orders that they defer to me because I'm willing to take command. I know I'll pay for this when the crisis is over, though they might accept the excuse of my being a bondsman anxious about my master. He fitted the bubble helmet over his head and fastened it at the neck. Someone helped him with his boots and gloves, then the tech at the lock yelped in amazement. The doors to the bridge slid open. From amid a cloud of gray smoke, two badly burned people stumbled out. Before they'd even cleared the doorway, medtechs hit them with painkillers and then guided them down the hallway. Felon grabbed 2 tanks of oxygen and dropped into a crouch. As soon as the injured were out of his way, he went in below the level of the rapidly dissipating smoke. Whatever hit us was big or moving fast, or both. With few exceptions, the workstations had ripped free of the deck and tumbled back toward the interior bulkhead. Buried beneath piles of technological debris, Felon saw arms and legs, but the rivulets of blood leaking from those mounds told him there was no help for the people beneath them. Others lay strewn across the torn-up deck, some of them moving feebly, but Felon continued past them in his search. He was in the holotank when I last saw him. As Felon moved toward the collapsed walls of the display unit, the smoke thinned enough to let him see the hole in the hull. Above and slightly to the right of the main view screen, it looked about the size of a mech's balled fist. Jagged daggers of metal pointed inward from the hole, but it was by no means enough to have resealed the hole. This place must have been sprayed with shrapnel upon impact. What the hell could it have been? Pipes running through the hull pumped gouts of a tarry substance over the breach, covering the hole with a glistening black curtain. Some of the dark fluid dribbled down the interior hull, staining the walls black, but most of it clung to the already present layer and increased its thickness. Felon could see the layer pulled taut, where vacuum from outside sucked at it, and he pushed down a momentary flash of panic. He realized that if it were to give, the vacuum would suck him and the others out into space. He looked around the bridge and shook his head. Obviously, anyone not pinned down by debris had flown out through the breach before the sealant had a chance to work. Though the odds were dismal, Felon knew he would find Ulrich. The repair tech's voice called anxiously over the radio.
Move it, people! That patch is really stressed. I do not know how much longer the Stravag thing will hold.
Felon shot a brief glance back over his shoulder toward the doorway. Let us know when you have some good news. The tech shook his head.
That is the good news, bondsman.
Reaching the remains of the holotank, Felon discovered a hollow beneath the lowest of the curved panels. Maybe, just maybe. He dropped to his knees and crawled in. Using the flashlight mounted on his right forearm, he dispelled the darkness and found himself staring at the Khan. Stravag! Gotta get him air! Felon fitted the mask from one of his oxygen tanks over Ulrich's ashen face and started the flow of oxygen. As carefully as possible, he shined the light around to see if the Khan had sustained other injuries besides a cut on the cheek. No compound fractures and nothing trapping him. Let's see if I can move him. The mercenary grabbed the Khan of the Wolf clan by the armpits and started to pull. As the Khan's body began to move, Felon felt some life coming back into the man's limbs. Ulrich opened his eyes and blinked at the glare of the flashlight. Ulrich brought his hands up and grabbed Felon's arms just above the elbows. Using the mercenary as a brace, the Khan pulled his body free of the holotank. He did his best to stand up, but his knees buckled almost immediately, so that Felon had to catch him before he could fall. The mercenary gestured to 2 of the white-suited medics. This is the Khan. Get him out of here. Suddenly, the radio speakers mounted in his helmet squawked to life.
Everyone get out of the bridge. The seal is at 110% of its maximum stress factor, and we have reports that the enemy activity is beginning to concentrate in this area. Move! I do not know how long I can hold it.
Felon started toward the doorway, but saw a pair of legs move weakly. He detoured over to see if he could help, then came up short. Just my luck, isn't it? Wedged part way beneath a curved magnesium girder, Vlad lay on his back with arms and legs splayed out crazily. None of his limbs appeared to be broken, but something had laid his face open on a line from above his left eyebrow to down his jaw. Down to his jaw. Blood covered that side of his face, but Felon knew he was alive.
"You, bondsman, move it. We're at 127% of max stress. The seal will go any second now."
The mercenary waved off the warning. Kneeling down, he tried to pull Vlad toward the center of the girder's curve, but something had snagged and held the clansman fast. It would be ironic if whatever kept you from flying out earlier would prevent me from saving you now. He reached up under the steel beam, unhooked the mech warrior from where his belt buckle had been wedged, and slid him free. Grabbing Vlad by the belt buckle Tyra had crafted, Felon dragged him out from under the metal that had pinned him. Hoisting the clansman over his left shoulder, the Kell hound ran toward the doorway as the tech waved him on. Vaulting piles of debris, he dashed closer to the exit, but 5 meters from Sanctuary he slipped in a pool of blood and went down. Vlad bounced from his shoulder and into the doorway, where the repair tech whisked him out of sight. Felon tried to scramble to his feet, but his blood-soaked boots could gain no traction. All around him, small pieces of debris began to vibrate and dance as the seal tore away around the edges. Felon clawed for anything that would pull him closer to the doorway, but nothing gave him purchase. He began to slip, centimeter by centimeter, toward the breach. Suddenly, a huge metal form filled the doorway. The elemental grabbed the mercenary by the scruff of his neck and heaved him into the corridor beyond the bridge, barely seconds before the bridge doors snapped shut behind them. Felon landed awkwardly in a heap, but the relief at being free of the vacuum's grasp erased any pain or embarrassment he felt. He climbed to his feet, and with the rippling crackle of parting Velcro, he yanked off his left glove. That must be really fancy Velcro if it's able to keep a airtight seal. He offered his hand to the elemental who had saved him. Space Velcro. Huh. He climbed to his feet, and with the rippling crackle of parting Velcro, he yanked off his left glove. He offered his hand to the elemental who had saved him. I don't know how I can ever thank you. The armored figure reached up and pulled off its helmet. Holding the helmet in the crook of her right elbow, Ivantha enfolded Felon's left hand in a steel grip. It would have been a waste to let you die. The mercenary's jaw dropped. Ivantha? After what I did on Rasselhag? Why? She shook his hand once, then released it. You may be a bondsman, Felon Patrick Kell, but you have a warrior's heart. You have much to learn about us and our ways, but you should realize that we respect you. To let you die needlessly would have been a greater sin than letting you defeat me. Then she let a grin break the fearsome mask she wore, and it would have prevented me from having the chance to fight you again. Felon stared after her as she walked off down the corridor behind the medtechs carrying Vlad away. She's right. I do have a lot to learn about the clans. Perhaps that's what Ulrich wants, for me to understand why they've come to the inner sphere. His thoughts drifted back to his pledge to help the Precentor Marshal unravel the mystery of the clans. But what happens when I have that knowledge, and how will I be allowed to use it? Chapter 42 Triad, Tharkad City, Tharkad, District of Donegal, Lyran Commonwealth, 10 November 3050. Victor Ian Steiner Davion smiled as he enfolded Kai Allard's hand in his own. I'm glad you've decided to remain in the AFFC. Losing you would have been a blow. Kai shook Victor's hand firmly, but the prince read doubt in his friend's gray eyes. I appreciate that, Highness, but I'm not certain it is deserved. As Victor's eyes narrowed, Kai held up his hands.
Don't say I'm being too hard on myself. It's just that sometimes you all try so hard to bolster my confidence that you may err on the other side. I do make mistakes, and I had to deal with the consequences of the one I made on Twycross. Thanks for giving me the time to do that.
Victor broke their grip and shrugged. It was the least I could do for the man who prevented the annihilation of 4 mech regiments. He opened his arms wide to take in the whole of the throne room where they stood. Green and gold bunting hung from the balustrades and encircled pillars. Even the 2 griffins that stood on either side of the Archon's throne had been repainted with the Donegal Guard's crest. If not for you, all this ribbon would be black, and there'd be no celebrations going on. Hell, after the drubbing you gave them, the clans have pulled back and made no attempt to retake Twycross. Kai pressed his lips together into a thin, grim line.
I appreciate that latter comment, but you and I both know better than to believe it.
You did what had to be done, Victor said almost sharply. You're not guilty of any crime. Dr. Lear said it herself. Those men were doomed before you ever sent them up there. Kai raked his fingers back through his dark hair.
I didn't need to send those men up there at all. I know the properties of pentaglycerin. I know that an explosion nearby could set it off. I knew that an explosion nearby could set it off. I could have used my autocannon or gotten some of the invaders to shoot missiles at me. Those men did not have to die. They could have been evacuated with the others. No matter how I try to look at it, I know their blood is on my hands.
Victor started to frown. This is basically what you said on Twycross when you resigned. Why the change? Why did you decide to stay with the AFFC? Kai pursed his lips, then sighed.
At first, I resented your having sentenced me to the medical evacuation ship taking folks off Twycross. My wounds were minor at best, and even though I'd decided to resign, I still felt responsible for my lance. I was trying to keep to myself on the Curie, but word got out somehow about who I was and what I'd done.
The lieutenant fixed Victor with a suspicious stare, but the prince backed off and raised his hands innocently. Hey, it wasn't me. And then he goes into internal monologue. Dr. Lear was on the Curie, but with orders to stay away from Kai. Though we didn't try to keep Kai's action a secret, it wasn't generally known either. I wonder.
Okay, Victor, I'll take your word for that.
Kai looked up toward the ceiling's shadowed spine, his eyes focusing distantly.
On the trip here to Tarkad, many soldiers came to thank me for the sacrifice I'd made to save them. They told me it took great courage to do what I had done. Some of them were soldiers who'd been evacuated from Dr. Lear's field hospital, and they thought they'd have wandered around forever if I hadn't come through and given them something to do. They told me that I saved their lives, and that they'd gladly serve under me again if given the chance. Maybe, for the first time in my life, I wasn't my father's son, or heir to my mother. They saw me as Kai Allard, and they welcomed me not because of my parents or my connections, but because of what I had done for them. They offered to serve with me because of something I accomplished on my own.
Kai, if you thought I became your friend because... Kai shook his head emphatically.
No, Victor, I know you didn't. I'm honored to have a few friends who, like you, persevered enough to get to know me. I should have said that at the start. But even you have to admit that we'd probably not have become friends if the positions of our families hadn't created a natural alliance between us.
Anyway, those men and women... Oh, whoops, that's him again. They ended the quote, but it's continuing.
Anyway, those men and women thanking me didn't exactly balance what happened on Twycross, but I realized that I'll never commit that same error again because I know the horror and pain of it. If I resign, however, some other green lieutenant might replace me and make the same mistake all over again.
Kai shrugged.
Therefore, Highness, I withdraw my resignation.
Victor looked at Kai with true joy in his eyes. He knew his friend still had the habit of second-guessing himself, but at least he'd begun to learn to put his actions in the proper perspective. It was a small change, but enough to make a difference. Victor heard the sound of a door opening behind him and saw Kai jerk to attention. He spun about quickly with his smile growing wider. His mother, Archon Melissa Steiner Davion, accompanied by Morgan Hasek Davion, entered the throne room through a side door. "Great news!" he told them. "Kai has withdrawn his resignation." Before he could say another thing, a third individual entered the throne room through the same door. Dressed in a black uniform, belted at the waist, with red piping running down the legs, the man stepped around Morgan and stood with his fists planted on his hips. His black eyes flashed with an unholy glee, and blue highlights played through his long black hair. Both shoulders of his jacket had been embroidered with a wolf's head design, including actual fur, and the rubies glinting from the wolf's eyes matched the fire in the man's eyes. Give me one sec. Trying to see if this is a guy that we know. Excuse me. I don't think it is. Okay, I don't know who this guy is off the top of my noggin, so we're going to move on. I'm going to just reread the last sentence so I'm back on track. Both shoulders of his jacket had been embroidered with a wolf's head design, including actual fur, and the rubies glinting from the wolf's eyes matched the fire in the man's eyes. "Victor Davion and Kai Allard Liao, how convenient to find you together." The man's sarcastic tone made Victor angry. "I am Victor. Whom do I have the honor of addressing?" The man threw back his head and barked a laugh that echoed throughout the cavernous room. "Spectacular!" He turned and nodded to Melissa. "The Steiner and Davion blood has mixed well in this one. Fire and steel. A little tempering, and he'll be invincible." The man looked beyond Victor toward Kai. "And this quiet one, he's one to watch." He winked at Morgan. "You know, back in the days of ancient Rome, they used to put a dwarf in the chariot with victorious generals. During the public parades, as the crowds lavished adulation on the general, the dwarf would whisper reminders that earthly glory was fleeting. An officer that carries his own dwarf with him, one that constantly checks to make sure he is right instead of just believing that he's right, that is a valuable man." Victor turned to watch how Kai took the compliment and was a bit surprised when Kai did not, as he expected, blush. Instead, Kai bowed slightly, then brought his head up and gave the man a wry smile. "Thank you, Major Ingov. That is high praise indeed." Victor frowned, looking toward Morgan. "What's going on here? I recognize the uniform. He's from the Wolf's Dragoons. Enlighten me, please." Morgan nodded to Sveng Ngov, and the mercenary smiled broadly at Victor. "It is simple, Highness. Colonel Jamie Wolf sent me to escort your mother, Morgan, Kai, and you to a strategy meeting on outreach." "Strategy meeting?" The furrows in Victor's brow deepened. "Why, last I knew it, the Wolf's Dragoons had opted to stay out of this war. Besides, the invaders have left." The mercenary's smile dimmed. "Times change, Prince Victor, and this meeting is to ensure that we, not they, control the speed, time, and direction of the change. If we don't, to butcher the old child's rhyme, all the king's mechs and all the king's men couldn't put the successor states back together again." Chapter 43. Palace of Obsidian and Jade, Imperial City, Luthien. Pesht Military District, Draconis Combine. 15 November 3050. Shin knelt carefully within the shadows of the garden wall. His black silk kimono rendered him all but invisible, but the garment's fine cloth did little to ward off the cold of the clear Luthian night. Shin welcomed the cold, though, for its numbing effect on the burning of his right side. He forced himself to control his breathing and drink in the garden's peace. Letting his eyes half close, he shut out what little light bled into the garden from the rest of the imperial city, not at all worried that he might doze off. Between the pain and the emotions running riot through him, sleep was the last of his problems. He lifted his head slightly to study the purple-black outline of the palace that was home to Conrad Theodore Kurita and his family. Like the old man's domain on Edo, this one was also modeled on ancient Japanese architecture. The central tower rose only 3 stories, but each was double normal height, and the tower had an incredible girth. Shin had traveled in dropships with less area and mass than this building. Oh, let me repeat that with proper emphasis on the right syllables. Shin had traveled in dropships with less area and mass than this building. He was honored that the Conray had granted him a room in this place. A long way from the slums on Marfik. In thinking of his life, everything before the invasion seemed faded and unreal, like early holodramas and ancient newsreels. The invaders were, in many ways, the most honorable of foes. Again and again they tried to match their forces to ours, so that we would not lose too much face, even in defeat. Sometimes they seemed downright naive in dealing with us, and since their defeat on Walcott, we've had no more attacks against our worlds. Could it be, in their way of looking at the universe, that one defeat calls for an end to their assault? As quickly as the question formed itself in his mind, he rejected it. No, that makes even less sense than some of the theories concerning who they really are. What little I've seen of the machines and suits we earned from the battle on Walcott leads me to believe that they're human, despite the size of those infantry. That they have battle mechs says they ran into humans with mechs at some point. But no one knows how far out periphery pirates may have ranged. Are they from some lost colony, or maybe the descendants of some charismatic leader who led people off unnoticed to build a martial society? Okay, that second one is clearly on the nose. Uh, our captives claim to be close-mouthed about their past because they say they are now members of the Kurita clan, yet they won't tell us what significance that has. It's a mystery wrapped within countless mysteries. Now that they've gone, will we ever be able to dig through these mysteries layer by layer? The barest hint of boot leather scraping against stone brought Shin's head up sharply. Eclipsing glittering stars, a slender figure vaulted up over the crenellated top of the wall and dropped to a crouch within the garden. As the intruder uncoiled and started to move toward the palace, Shin identified her as female. No weapons visible. An assassin? Noiselessly, Shin picked up a pebble, then stood and moved forward. He whipped the pebble against the garden's far wall. As the intruder turned to identify the sound, he came in at her back, but did not strike her from behind. Stop! Instead of obeying his command, she whirled and executed a roundhouse kick meant to take his head off. Shin ducked beneath most of it, though her heel clipped him and knocked him slightly off balance. Recovering as she came around to face him, he dropped into a fighting stance. Again, moving more quickly than he expected, she grabbed at his right wrist and pain immediately shot up to his shoulder. Though agony numbed the limb, Shin slipped his arm from the kimono's sleeve, ducked, and spun away. As the intruder pulled on the garment, the Yakuza let it be stripped from his torso. His movement took him into the center of the garden and left his foe holding the empty kimono. Doors at both the garden and the balcony levels opened, spilling pale light out into the night. One rectangle trapped Shin and splashed his long-legged shadow against the garden wall. The intruder cast the kimono aside in preparation for another attack, then stopped short and bowed respectfully to him. Shin's mouth dropped open in surprise. Fighting one moment, then bowing the next? What's going on here? As the intruder came up, Shin bowed to her, then tried to recall where he had seen that red wolf's head insignia decorating the left breast of her tunic. Wolf's Dragoons? Was it possible? After all this time, the only thing they could want here is the Coordinator's death. If so, why attack the Conray's palace? The intruder pulled off her black balaclava, which let her long blonde hair spill down over her shoulders. Konbanwa, Conray Kurita-sama, she offered in flawless Japanese to the man standing on the balcony. I bring you the greetings of Colonel Jamie Wolfe. The Conray rested his fists on his hips. Colonel Wolfe sends greetings to me. A note of humor entered his voice. Has the Christian hell truly frozen over, or is this some manner of trick? Do dragoon envoys always assault the trusted aides of those whom they bring a message? Of those to whom they bring a message, sorry. I don't know how I skipped that. Is the Christian hell truly frozen over, or is this some manner of trick? Do the dragoon envoys always assault the trusted aides of those to whom they bring a message? The woman laughed, a lilting sound completely at odds with the deadly menace Shin had sensed from her earlier. Major Lilith Lang of Wolf's Dragoons at your service. This is no trick, and I would not have attacked Shin-Yodama had I known it was him. Shin stared at her. What? How did you know? Lilith pointed at the Yakuza's chest. Your history identified you. The left side proclaims you a member of the Kuroi Kiri, and the right sings of other great deeds. The light from the palace lit the outlines of Shin's new tattoo. Part of the snarling Smoke Jaguar face had already been filled in on his shoulder. Its gold eyes glared defiantly at both the mercenary and the Conray. Below it, traced in black, was the crumpled form of a dead armored infantryman, transfixed with a sword. The trail of stars and jumps made in the escape from Turtle Bay decorated the length of Shin's right arm from wrist to shoulder, and scenes from the prison break bled over from his back to the side of his ribs. Now we know why his side hurt. Hohiro, entering the garden through the ground-level entrance, pulled his kimono tight against the cold. I was unaware that Colonel Wolfe had such an interest in my father's men. There is much that interests the dragoons, and much of which you are ignorant, Hohiro, Lilith hissed, her icy tone matching his. She looked up at Theodore. It is to end this ignorance that I am sent to bring you, your family, and Shin-Yodama to Outreach. There is much for you to learn. Hohiro laughed scornfully, but the Conray seemed to consider her outrageous statement for a moment or two. I would be a fool to travel alone to the headquarters of an enemy. The mercenary smiled. Colonel Wolfe predicted that you would say that. He said that you may bring your Genyosha or Ryuken with you if need be, but he hoped that the promise of safe passage from Dechan Fraser and Jeanette Rand would suffice. He also said that his war was never with you or the Combine, it was only with Samsonov and your father. It is because of that vendetta that I could not come here openly. But you must realize that if the Colonel had sent me on a mission of destruction, nothing could have stopped me. Well spoken, Theodore agreed. I shall not need the Genyosha or Ryuken with me, but I would like to bring Taisa Narimasa Asano. Lilith beamed up at him. Excellent. Colonel Wolfe said he looked forward to finally meeting Taisa Asano. Gather your people and shuttle out on a vector to the Ginka orbital factory. We'll radio coordinates to our jump ship. Hohiro walked further into the garden and looked up at his father. This is madness, Sosen. We've just driven off an enemy, and now you deliver us into the hands of another. I don't understand. The Conray exchanged a look with Lilith, then spoke quietly but firmly to his son. It is not for you to understand right now, Hohiro. You must just obey. For Colonel Wolfe to take the risk of sending an envoy here means that his purpose is a serious one. Wolfe is no fool, nor is he mad. That's enough for me. Chapter 44. Wolf's Dragoons General Headquarters, Outreach. Sarna March, Federated Commonwealth. 12 January 3051. Victor Ian Steiner Davion. Victor Ian Steiner Davion. Victor Ian Steiner Davion. Victor Ian Steiner Davion stood in the doorway of the hall, awestruck by the crowd of people filling the room. If even half the stories I've heard are true, so many powerful people have not gathered in one place since the wedding of my mother and father. Military leaders moved in and out of small groups surrounding the political leaders, while members of Wolf's Dragoons, looking as though they fiercely resented the service, offered drinks and tidbits to their guests. Perhaps most shocking to Victor was that, with so many important people present, no one noticed his arrival. The second he caught himself feeling piqued, he smiled. Recall, Victor, that here you are a very small fish in a big pond. You are neither a political nor military giant, yet, and therefore should be content with having been invited at all. His thoughts began to drift toward the puzzle he, Kai, and Morgan had tried to solve during the journey to Outreach, but he stopped himself. We weren't able to figure out why Wolf was calling us together then, so there's no sense wasting brain sweat on it now. Amid the press of people, Victor saw a familiar figure in the red and black uniform of the Kell Hounds. The man stood tall and gave off an aura of strength and power. He wore his salt and pepper hair long enough to reach the shoulders of his red jacket, but kept his white beard closely trimmed. As always, Victor had the strange sensation that death would have to take this man asleep because it could never take him awake. Victor crossed to where Morgan Kell stood talking with two people from the Free Worlds League, and they politely backed away as Davion approached. At the sight of him, Morgan's face lit up. "Highness," said his mother's cousin and founder of the Kell Hounds, "as always, seeing you is a pleasure without equal." Taking Morgan's hand, Victor returned the smile. "Without equal? My mother will not be happy to hear that." Morgan Kell laughed aloud. "Ah, you caught me, for your mother has a special place in my heart. Consider my statement amended, but no less heartfelt." "Done." The mercenary looked Victor up and down, then nodded with satisfaction. "Dan Allard told me good things about you in that action on Twycross. He said that you can think on your feet, and that you weren't afraid of mixing it up. That's good." His eyes focused distantly. "It got your Uncle Ian killed on Mallory's world, but it pulled your father and your cousin, Morgan Hassock Davion, out of more scrapes than I've got fingers and toes to number. If the hounds hadn't been there and Colonel Allard had not been willing to take the chance, things would have turned out much differently." Morgan's eyes narrowed. "And if you hadn't sent Kai Allard to recon the pass, how would things have turned out?" Victor looked over to where Kai stood with his mother, father, and twin sisters. If only he'd allow himself to realize it. Morgan Kell cupped one hand around the back of Victor's neck. "I think you'll find that warriors like Kai keep a tight rein on themselves because they're afraid of what would happen if they don't. Just be thankful he's on your side. If he ever cuts loose, there's not much in the inner sphere that could stop him." The growing whine of an electric wheelchair precluded any further comment by Victor. He turned to see a man dressed in the uniform of a general in the army of the Free Rasselhag Republic. His silver hair and black streaked beard were vaguely familiar, but it was the sight of the scar on the left side of the man's face that dredged up a name from Victor's memory. That's Tor Miraborg. He must be here with Hakon Magnusson, the Silver Fox. Wolf really did get everyone here. For a moment, Victor thought the female aerospace pilot following Miraborg might be his daughter, but the nameplate over her left breast pocket read Jansen. Miraborg fixed Morgan Kell with a savage stare. "You are Morgan Kell?" The mercenary nodded silently. "I am Tor Miraborg. Your son murdered my daughter." The anger and pain in the crippled man's voice made Victor cringe, but Morgan kept his face impassive. "Explain how my son, dead for a year and a half now, could have murdered your daughter." Raw hatred washed over Miraborg's face.
Your son came between Tyra and me. His influence drove her away and made her accept a position with the Rasselhag Dracons. My daughter died fighting the invaders.
Morgan pulled himself up to his full height.
Then your daughter and my son shared one last thing in their two brief lives. I received a holodisc from her not long ago, and she was kind enough to share with me and my wife some remembrances of her times with Felon.
Miraborg's shoulders slumped forward, and his chin dipped to his chest.
She talked to you?
He asked in a tortured whisper.
She recorded a holodisc for you? Why?
Victor recognized the question Miraborg dared not voice.
She never communicated with her father, and he doesn't know why.
Her disc came in response to one I had sent her, Morgan replied quietly. I will let you see the message, if you wish. The Iron Jarl shook himself, and the fire came back into his eyes and voice.
No, I want no part of your message. She stopped being my daughter the day she left Goodsburg.
He spun his chair and headed off through the crowd, leaving the slim, blonde woman standing alone in his wake. Annika looked up at Morgan.
Colonel Kell, I'm Annika Janssen. I was Tyra's wingmate. I was also her best friend.
She glanced after Miraborg, then shook her head.
Ignore what he said. He's just a bitter old man. I knew your son and was with him and Tyra many times. I was there when they met. You have nothing to be ashamed of in your son Felon and Tyra.
Oh, gosh, there's a period there that I didn't see.
You have nothing to be ashamed of in your son. Felon and Tyra were very good for each other.
The mercenary rested both of his hands on her shoulders. Thank you, Lieutenant. I'm glad to know Felon had friends. Annika swallowed hard.
And if you wouldn't mind, sir, I'd like to see that holodisc she made. Tyra and I never really had a chance to say goodbye. She took her Shylone into the invader flagship, right into the bridge. She did more to stop the invasion than anyone else in the whole Royal Kungsarm, but the Iron Jarl won't acknowledge her heroism.
I will have a copy of the disc to you by tomorrow morning. Morgan smiled warmly at her. And thank you. As Annika withdrew, a commotion at the door caught Victor's attention. Dressed in a black silk gown with red trim that might have been a parody of the dragoon uniform, Romano Lao, Chancellor of the Capellan Confederation, was desperately trying to get one of the two dragoons at the door to announce her. The hapless guards tried to ignore her at first, but when she punched one of them in frustration, the man reacted and drew back his hand to slap her. A slender, dark-haired man slipped between them, facing Romano. The guard caught himself even as the younger man gently grabbed his mother's wrists. For a moment Romano's face contorted with rage, but then she kissed her son on the cheek, with a look of sheer adoration. Meanwhile, Tsen Shang, her consort, stepped forward to take her arm and lead her away. Oh, this is going to be a fun sentence. Victor shook his head.
No doubt she's as mad as her father was. It looks as though her son, Sun Tzu,
that is really what that says,
can control her, but for how long?
Sorry. Victor shook his head.
No doubt she's as mad as her father was. It looks as though her son, Sun Tzu, can control her, but for how long?
He looked over at Kai, who was watching Sun Tzu Lao trail after his parents.
Both Kai and Sun Tzu are Maximilian Lao's grandsons, each one entitled to press a claim to the throne of the Capellan Confederation. I don't think Kai wants it, but would that stop Sun Tzu from wanting to get rid of a potential rival?
At the far end of the room, the leader of Wolf's dragoons mounted a dais. Behind him came another man in a dragoon uniform, but he stopped as Wolf approached the podium at center stage. The rest of the dragoon command staff filtered up onto the dais, but remained back along the wall.
Victor frowned. That's odd. Where's the Black Widow? I hadn't heard that Natasha Kerensky was wounded or killed.
Jamie Wolf smoothed his thinning gray hair.
Thank you all for responding to the summons that has brought us together here on outreach. Some of you must have found it strange, and yet you have sensed that my reason was not frivolous. Rather, I wish to speak to you about a problem that faces all of us, and whose true depth perhaps only the dragoons can know. Before I begin, however, I would like to present my new second-in-command.
With one hand, Wolf indicated the younger man standing a few steps behind him.
Some of you may have known him as Major Darnell Winningham. His real name is Mackenzie Wolf, and he is my son. He will now replace Natasha Kerensky.
Wolf let the whispered reactions to his announcement rise like a wave and then die down again as he continued.
As you all know, the Inner Sphere has been invaded in the last year by an enemy possessing battle mechs of extraordinary power. Recently, the forces of the Federated Commonwealth and Draconis Combine have had modest successes against these invaders. After months of trial and error, they finally managed to hand the invaders a defeat. Since then, the invaders, for all intents and purposes, have withdrawn into the shell of the worlds they conquered.
Someone shouted, "It's because we kicked their butts!" Victor couldn't identify the voice, but he found himself caught up in the defiant chorus of assent. We did hit them hard. Wolf shook his head.
Can you really believe that so implacable an enemy is cowed by minor defeats? They withdrew because one Rasselhag pilot sacrificed herself by smashing her Shylone into the invaders' flagship. At the very least, she killed the invasion leader and devastated the command structure of the enemy forces. If she'd missed 10 meters up or down, left or right, the invaders would still be marching inexorably forward. If you are so naive as to think that 2 minor victories and a lucky stroke by a brave pilot could drive these invaders back, our chances for success are poor in our war against them.
Our war? It was Romano Lao's voice.
Of course! I knew it all along!
She laughed triumphantly and turned to lord it over the others.
You've just been waiting for our troops to take stock of these invaders. Now Wolf's dragoons will stalk from their den and into the battle.
She looked up at Jamie Wolf.
Yours are the fiercest mercenaries in the Inner Sphere. With your help, we shall send these Rimworld renegades running.
Let's get more rolls on those R's, because I like alliteration. She looked up at Jamie Wolf.
Yours are the fiercest mercenaries in the Inner Sphere. With your help, we shall send these Rimworld renegades running.
Much more fun. Wolf cut her off with a hard stare.
I'm afraid you have it all wrong, Madam Chancellor. The enemy we face is not composed of either renegades or bandits. The invaders will be back, probably in less than a year. We will have to be ready to meet them with everything we've got, because we've seen only a small sample of their strength.
Wolf's voice and expression became grim.
After Radstadt and after the death of their war leader, they'll come at us at full strength. They'll ask no quarter and grant none. Ladies and gentlemen, now begins what could easily be the last days of the Inner Sphere.
Epilogue. Name of the Beast. JumpShip Dire Wolf. Transfer Orbit. Rasselhag, Wolf Clan Occupation Zone. 12 January 3051. Felon Kell entered the Dire Wolf's small shuttlecraft bay and easily picked out the Precenter Marshal from the milling crowd of yellow-robed Comstar acolytes helping with his baggage. He threaded his way through them and extended his hand to the one-eyed man. "I only just heard you were leaving." Anastasius Vogt shook Felon's hand warmly.
"Yes, Ulrich felt it would be for the best. He said I would not be welcome where the clan is going."
The older man released the mercenary's hand, then smiled quizzically at him.
"What is going to happen with you? Any news of the inquiry into your behavior during the attack?"
The Kell hound shook his head slowly.
"No, They've kept me virtually incommunicado since the battle at Radstadt, but more pressing matters may have taken precedence over my fate. It's my impression that the Smoke Jaguars wanted to raise Radstadt because survivors from the Rasselhag fleet were likely to take refuge there. Vogt nodded in agreement, then walked Felon away from the other Comstar personnel. Ulrich said that losing the Ilkhan's body to the vacuum of space drove the Jaguars into a frenzy. He was from their clan, you know. They were upset that you saved Ulrich but not the Ilkhan. If I'd seen him, I'd have done what I could. Don't forget, I pulled Vlad from the bridge, too. The Precentor Marshal nodded. I know, Felon. The young man touched Vogt's sleeve. I realize Ulrich may have placed restrictions on the information to be passed on to Comstar, but if there's any way you can get word to my family... The Precentor Marshal touched his right palm to Felon's forehead. The peace of Blake be with you, Felon Kell. I don't know what the Primus will approve concerning the clans. As we are to implement some of the occupation policies for the clans during their absence, Comstar is in a delicate position. If nothing else, perhaps I can let them know their son made them proud. The mercenary nodded, then smiled weakly. Thank you. I feel like we've become friends, and I'll miss talking with you. And I can't thank you enough for your help during the whole business about Rana and Vlad. I'm still not fully at ease about that situation, but maybe I've learned from my mistakes. Remember, Vogt said, almost fondly, that's why the body forms scars. Felon threw the Precentor Marshal a salute, then turned and left the bay. Watching from a window in the airlock near the door, he saw Vogt board the blocky Watching from a window in the airlock near the door, he saw Vogt board the blocky shuttle and seal the hatch. The viewport frosted over as launch control drained the bay of atmosphere and opened the external hatch. Felon had no chance to watch the ship depart. Two elementals in full armor, with red sashes slung across their chests, entered the viewing room. The mottled gray and black camouflage pattern identified them as belonging to the Smoke Jaguar clan.
Felon Patrick Kell?
Yes, Felon answered, wondering about the seriousness of the man's tone. I am he. The one on his right pointed down the corridor.
You will come with us.
The first elemental started off toward the core of the ship, and the second followed closely behind, with Felon sandwiched between them. Full of apprehension, Felon tugged at the braided cord surrounding his right wrist. Bondsmen may not be slaves and might get better treatment than bandits and other social misfits, but the word civil is not a word that fits the rights or relations between warriors and any other caste in this culture. Then another sudden thought brought a smile. Well, at least I know they're a bit leery of me. The elementals are in armor this time. One of the lift doors already stood open, with another elemental standing there keeping the cage clear. I've never seen them do that before. The elemental behind Felon nudged him forward into the cage, where the mercenary squeezed back into a corner as the elemental trio filled the elevator. Though he could not see the panel showing the deck numbers flashing by, he knew they were headed forward toward the bridge level. When the ride ended somewhat prematurely, Felon realized they'd stopped on one of the forbidden decks where only warriors were allowed. His mouth went dry, then tasted sour. The elementals ushered him along a short corridor, then stopped at a door that bore no identifying icon. One elemental rapped on the door with a metal fist, and it slid noiselessly upward. Suddenly, the elemental behind Felon shoved hard, spilling him into the room. The door slid shut again, leaving the mercenary alone in utter darkness. Blinded, Felon held his hands out in front of his face, then stepped forward until he felt a wall. Moving to the right, he completed a cautious circuit of the room. 2 meters by 2 meters with no furnishings. This is a less hospitable berth than I had when I was originally captured. The elementals who brought me here were Smoke Jaguars. Are they going to take revenge upon me for the death of the Ilkhan? Felon whirled as a door at his back whisked open. Standing back 2 meters from the doorway and illuminated by a spotlight from above, a woman beckoned him forward. "Is that you, Rana?" By her elaborate dress and gestures, he sensed that her silence held special significance. Dressed in a tight-fitting bodysuit of white leather that left her arms and legs bare, she might have been an apparition. Silver studded the costume, and long leather thongs hung down like a loincloth. Knee-length mech-warrior boots of polished silver encased her lower legs, and gauntlets of fine steel mesh covered her hands and arms to the elbow. A short cloak of white wolf fur fell from her shoulders to mid-back. A silver wolf's head clasp with ruby eyes fastened the cloak at her throat. Though Felon thought he recognized her form and stance, he could not be certain because the woman wore a mask. It reminded him of nothing so much as the fierce visage of his wolfhound battle mech. Worked with the greatest of skill, the white enameled mask took the form of a wolf's head. The beast's mouth hung open, its lips pulled back in a snarl, but Rana's blue eyes shining through the mask's eye slits took away some of the threat. He took one step forward, and she vanished. The light from above winked out, then another light flashed on, and she appeared further on. She invited him forward with a languid gesture, then abruptly shot both her hands up and out above her shoulders. Silver flashed, and a metallic ring filled the darkness as her hands stopped twin swords from flashing down. Felon rushed forward and passed beneath her right arm. Blackness swept in again as Rana released the blades, and they whistled down to complete their arcs. In the darkness, the Kell hound felt all his senses come alive, and his heart began pumping. "This must be some strange justice ritual of the clans. The Smoke Jaguars desire my death, but Ulrich has sent a representative of the Wolf clan to ward me and assist me." I don't know, man. This sounds an awful lot like really strange foreplay to me. He felt Rana move past him, but he concentrated instead on identifying other perceptions. On his left, he heard the dry whisper of boot against deck. Instantly, he dropped to his hands and knees, letting the sword slice air where, a moment or two before, it would have met his spine. He stabbed out with his left foot and hit something. His target did not cry out, but the thump of a body hitting the floor and the clatter of a dropped sword made Felon smile. Ahead of him, Rana appeared again within a circle of light. As he trotted toward her, she squatted down, then leaped up. Responding immediately, the Kell hound dove up and forward. 2 swords sparked as they collided, passing centimeters below his belly. Felon tucked and rolled forward, but as he came up, he sensed a motion on his right. Too late. He twisted away from it, but felt the burning sting as the blade slashed through the flesh on his right thigh. He allowed his pirouette to carry him closer to Rana, then dropped to one knee and probed the wound with his right hand. Reaching through the cut in his jumpsuit leg, his hand came away warm, wet, and sticky. "That's a good 5 centimeter cut, but it seems to be shallow. Hurts like a son of a bitch, but it won't slow me down." He reached Rana's side, fully expecting her to vanish when the light above her died, but it did not. Instead, another spotlight pinned a figure to the black floor. Tall and strong, Ulrich stood shrouded in a floor-length cloak of black and gray wolf fur. The light from above burned brightly from his white hair, but hid his eyes in impenetrable pockets of shadow. His deep voice filled the void. "Trothkin, seen and unseen, near and far, living and dead, rejoice as the wolf has brought us a foundling." He let the words echo through the darkness until silence reigned once more. "It was 47 years ago that the womb of steel whelped a pup such as this. That birthing is but a thing of legend, but none will deny the rede of it." From the surrounding dark, Felon heard 1,000 voices whisper as one, "Selah." Ulrich's voice dropped into a wolfish growl.
I am the Oathmaster. All will be bound by this conclave until they are dust and memories, and then beyond that time until the end of all that is. Sail!
The sibilant murmuring raised goosebumps on Felon's flesh. Tension built in him as his mind struggled frantically to pierce the mysteries of this terrible ceremony. They try to kill me, then make me the centerpiece of some bizarre ritual. I don't understand half the words or what Ulrich is trying to say. I hope like hell I can figure out what's going on, or as sure as this bond cord encircles my wrist, I'm going to be one dead little bondsman. Ulrich looked around as though his eyes could see those gathered beyond the circle of light. The wolf's wisdom is not in doubt, but there are those who believe the wolf's generosity is too great. Who would deny this pup his life? The mercenary saw Ulrich's head come up at the rustling sound behind him. Stepping forward into a white circle painted on the deck was a small, slender man of the large-headed body type Felon had come to associate with Clan Aerojocks. His spectacular costume had been cut from green leather and patterned after an aeropilot's flight suit. Instead of a short cloak of fur, he wore a brilliant gold and malachite pectoral, with two stylized wings rising up on either side of his head. His hawk head mask, also made of gold and malachite, was a masterwork of artistry. As the man removed his mask, Ulrich's voice boomed from behind Felon. I recognize thee, Cavell Malthus of the Jade Falcons.
Oathmaster, I ken death from the skies for this pup.
Cavell watched the bondsman with huge, hungry brown eyes.
Aye, it is death, I see.
Ulrich's voice rang out strongly. Who among the wolves would deny this vision? Moving to eclipse Felon's view of Cavell, an aerofighter pilot stepped in. His costume paralleled Cavell's in shape, but was made from dark gray leather. Like Rana's costume, his included a cloak of gray fur settled over his shoulder. As Cavell removed his helmet, the mercenary saw a flash of golden hair. I recognize thee, Carew of the Wolves.
Oathmaster, it is my ken that this pup need fear nothing from the air.
As Carew's voice trailed off, both he and Cavell again donned their masks. Neither moved from their places. Beside them, two more spotlights brought illumination to two more circles on the deck. A Titan stepped forward from the darkness. His costume of light gray leather had not been tailored to represent any clan military garb that Felon could recognize, but that mattered little. Instead, he marveled at how the material stretched taut to mold itself to the massive, powerfully built man. Though the garment covered him from throat to boot tops, a loincloth of Smoke Jaguar fur had been added to mark his clan affiliation, as though his savage jaguar mask could be mistaken for anything else. The elemental solemnly removed his mask.
I recognize thee, Lincoln Osis of the Smoke Jaguars.
The black man's voice sounded deeper than Ulrich's, and was an almost perfect impersonation of a jaguar's hoarse growl. Oathmaster, I ken death by hand for this pup. Aye, it is death I see. Again Ulrich voiced a request to the assembly hidden in the shadows.
Who among the wolves would deny this vision?
Another wolf moved to stand between Felon and his challenger. Even if he had not seen the long red braid lying against her spine, he would have known Evantha from the way she stalked out to take her place.
I recognize thee, Evantha frickadoodle. What does that say?
Fetladral. Interesting.
I recognize thee, Evantha Fetladral of the Wolves.
Felon sensed the barest hint of challenge and scorn in Evantha's reply.
Oathmaster, it is my ken that this pup need fear nothing from the hand.
As Evantha and Lincoln again donned their masks, the final two circles on the deck blazed to life with reflected light. Almost immediately, a man moved into the Challenger's circle. Felon realized that his costume, like Rana's, was a version of the abbreviated attire mech warriors wore in their steamy cockpits. A thick cloak of white fur covered the man, fastened at his throat by knotting together the fur around a bear's forward paws. The intermediate paws were similarly tied together at his waist. The bear mask the man wore seemed to be inlaid with opal, which mirrored the shimmering pelt he wore. "I recognize thee, Garold Winson of the Ghost Bears."
Oathmaster, I ken death from his equals.
His voice dropped to a rhyme-laden whisper.
Aye, it is death I see.
Felon heard a change in Ulrich's voice as he asked for a wolf to refute Winson's vision of the future. The mercenary half expected Rana to leave his side, but she remained in place as another stepped forward. Obviously a woman, this one's costume matched Rana's in all but color, yet flattered her figure equally. Where Rana wore white, this mech warrior wore black, including the abbreviated cloak of wolf fur. Red hair cascaded onto her shoulders, and Felon saw a scarlet hourglass symbol on the abdomen of her leather clothing. Oh boy, here we go! Felon's jaw dropped as she removed her mask, and Ulrich spoke. "I recognize thee, Natasha Kerensky of the Wolves." The mercenary stared at her in disbelief, but she shot him a grin before facing her opposition. Natasha Kerensky? But she's Jamie Wolf's second in command. What is she doing here, and why is she recognized by the clans? As quickly as that question formed itself in his head, the answer hit him with frightful clarity. Oh my God. They're not Wolf's Dragoons. They're the Wolf Dragoons. They've been part of the clans all along. Felon suddenly realized he was not alone in his shock. Garold Winson had paled visibly. From the darkness enclosing them, the mercenary heard hushed whispers. Still grinning, Natasha seemed to revel in the disturbance she caused.
Oathmaster, Natasha said contemptuously, I have known this pup for years. He has nothing to fear from his equals, or those who would style him his betters.
"Face me, pup!" Ulrich's voice brought Felon around. The Khan regarded him with hollow eyes. "Thrice he has been challenged, and 3 defenders have risen for him. Sponsored by the Wolf, warded by the clan, all is in order." From beneath his cloak, Ulrich produced a silver dagger with a wolf's head pommel. He moved forward. "Give me your right hand." Felon held up his hand, and Ulrich slid the knife down between the mercenary's flesh and the bond cord. "This marked you as a bondsman, but yours is the heart, the mind, and the soul of a warrior. The wolf has seen it, and I, the Oathmaster, proclaim it." Tugging the knife back toward himself, Ulrich sliced the bond cord in half. With an expert flip, he reversed the knife, then pressed its pommel into Felon's wrist, and folded his fingers down over it. Triumphantly, he thrust the Kell Hound's hand into the air. "Let us rejoice and let pride sing out! The wolves have a new warrior among their number!" A mild burst of respectful applause resounded from the shadows, then quickly died away as Ulrich backed away from Felon to his original position. Felon lowered his hand, then heard something behind him. He turned slowly and saw another mech warrior, this one clad in the Wolf Clan costume, making his way from the shadows. He stopped in front of Felon and removed his mask. The mercenary narrowed his eyes. What now? He glanced at the sword in the wolf's right hand and saw a dark stain on its tip. Yes, it had to be you, Quiaf. Vlad removed his mask and nestled it between his right elbow and ribs. Still livid, the scar left from his injury on the bridge ran down from his left eye to his jaw. Felon shuddered at the sight. Why do all the mech warriors who loathe me have Radstad scars? Vlad executed a crisp, formal bow. Coming up again, he locked eyes with Felon in a stare that left no doubt that Vlad's hatred ran more than, as Griff had said, bone deep. That hatred runs soul deep, Felon warned himself. There may well come a day when you regret having rescued him from the dire wolf's bridge. Vlad swallowed hard before speaking. Welcome, bloodkin, to the House of Ward. He extended his left hand to Felon in greeting, but his right hand scraped the bell guard of the sword against the wolf's head buckle Vlad wore. Felon did not miss the gesture. I'll remember you, Vlad, each and every time I see Tyra's belt buckle on you, just as you'll remember me whenever you look in a mirror. There will come a day when we settle our differences once and for all. Constrained by the formality of the gathering, Felon merely met Vlad's grip with one matched in strength. They broke their handshake, and Vlad drifted back into the shadows. Felon turned to face the Khan once more. Ulrich peered into the room's shadowy depths. I, Ulrich Kerensky, Khan of the Wolves, and Oathmaster of this conclave, do welcome you, Felon Patrick Kell, to the Clan of the Wolves. According to the custom handed down since Alexander Kerensky led our forefathers from this place, and his son Nicholas saved us from ourselves, you will be known to the children of Kerensky as Felon Wolf. All are to abide by the rede given here. Thus it shall stand until we all shall fall. Thus it shall stand until we all shall fall, echoed the crowd. The lights illuminating Felon's challengers and defenders died, leaving visible only Ulrich, Rana, and Felon. No one spoke, and Felon interpreted the only sounds he heard as the passage of the assembled clanspeople from the room. When complete silence again reigned in the chamber, Ulrich stepped forward and offered Felon his left hand. You are one of us now, Felon Wolf. You are a bondsman no more. Through this conclave you have become a warrior. You are henceforth accorded all the rights and privileges of your station, as well as all the responsibilities and duty of a wolf warrior. Felon took Ulrich's hand and shook it warmly. It was as though, for the first time, he belonged to something outside his family. I thank you, my Khan, for this honor, but there is so much I don't know or understand. What did the challenges mean? What did Vlad mean in welcoming me to the House of Ward? Ulrich shook his head. You are young yet, by our standards. All your questions will be answered in your training. Now, however, is a time for celebration. It has been nearly 5 decades since the Wolf Warriors adopted someone not born to the caste. You will also be honored and rewarded for your actions on the bridge, though I fear the most suitable reward must wait until our journey's end. Journey? He suddenly remembered the Precentor Marshal's fleeting reference to the clan's absence. What is this journey? The Khan's eyes narrowed, and the light from above made his face into a death's head. We will travel to where the clans, all the clans, must meet to discuss what we have done. We will elect a new Ilkhan and review our successes and our failures. Then, under the leadership of the new Ilkhan, we will return to the Inner Sphere and complete the liberation of the Star League from the forces that destroyed it 3 centuries ago. And that is the end of the book proper, but we do have a glossary and a list of equivalent ranks in Inner Sphere militaries as of the year 3050 of the setting, which is unfortunately printed in opposite direction, so give me a sec here. Equivalent ranks in Inner Sphere militaries, 3050.
Standard Mercenary. Officer ranks. Colonel, Lieutenant Colonel, Major, Captain, Lieutenant, and then enlisted ranks are Sergeant Major, Sergeant, Corporal, and Private. In the Federated Commonwealth, you have Marshal of the Armies, Field Marshal, Marshal, Hauptmann General, Lieutenant General, Commandant, Hauptmann, and Lieutenant, as well as enlisted ranks of Sergeant Major, Kashira, Shujin, Sergeant, Corporal, Gunjin, Private, and Hojuhei. In the Draconis Combine, you have Taishu, or Warlord, Taisho, Shosho, Taisa, Chusa, Shosa, Tai-E, Chu-E, and then in enlisted ranks, you have the Shoko, Gunso, Gocho, and Heishi. And then in the Free Russelhog Republic, we have a Sneeze, followed by General, followed by General Major, followed by Oberst Leutnant, Oberst, sorry, it isn't actually a sneeze, but it is frickadoodle. It is Overbefalhaver. Overbefalhaver. I'm mangling one of the umlauts. Overbefalhaver, General, General Major, all one word, Oberstleutnant, Oberst, Major, Captain, Lieutenant, and then in enlisted ranks you have the Fanjunkar, Sergeant, Corporal, and Menig. All right, on to the glossary, which is about 3 pages long, maybe 4-ish, about 3 pages. Glossary: autocannon. The autocannon is a rapid-firing, auto-loading weapon. Light vehicle autocannon range from 30 to 90 millimeter caliber, while heavy mech autocannon may be 80 to 120 millimeters or more. The weapon fires high-speed streams of high-explosive, armor-piercing shells. Because of the limitations of mech targeting technology, the autocannon's effective anti-mech range is limited to less than 600 meters. Battle Mech. Battle mechs are the most powerful war machines ever built. First developed by Terran scientists and engineers more than 500 years ago, these huge, man-shaped vehicles are faster, more mobile, better armored, and more heavily armed than any 20th century tank. 10 to 12 meters tall and equipped with particle projection cannons, lasers, rapid-fire autocannon, and missiles, they pack enough firepower to flatten anything but another battle mech. A small fusion reactor provides virtually unlimited power, and battle mechs can be adapted to fight in environments ranging from sun-baked deserts to sub-zero Arctic ice fields. Comstar. Comstar, the interstellar communications network, was the brainchild of Jerome Blake, formerly Minister of Communications during the latter years of the Star League. After the League's fall, Blake seized Terra and reorganized what was left of the League's communications network into a private organization that sold its services to the 5 successor houses for a profit. Since that time, Comstar has also developed into a powerful secret society steeped in mysticism and ritual. Initiates to the Comstar Order commit themselves to lifelong service. JumpShips and Dropships. JumpShip. Interstellar travel is accomplished via jump ships, first developed in the 22nd century. Named for their ability to jump instantaneously from one point to another, the vessels consist of a long, thin drive core and an enormous sail. The sail is constructed from a specially coated polymer that absorbs vast quantities of electromagnetic energy from the nearest star. Energy collected by the sail is slowly transferred to the drive core, which converts it into a space-twisting field. After making its jump, the ship cannot travel again until it has recharged its drive with solar energy at its new location. Safe recharge times range from 6 to 8 days. Jump ships travel instantaneously across vast interstellar distances by means of the Kearney-Fuchida hyperdrive. The KF drive generates a field around the jump ship, then opens a hole into hyperspace. In moments, the jump ship is transported through to its new destination, across distances of up to 30 light years. Jump points are the locations within a star system where the system's gravity is next to nothing, the prime prerequisite for operation of the KF drive. The distance away from the system's star is dependent on that star's mass, and is usually many tens of millions kilometers away. Every star has two principal jump points, one at the zenith point at the star's north pole, and one at the nadir point at the south pole. An infinite number of other jump points also exist, but are used only rarely. Jump ships never land on planets, and only rarely travel into the inner parts of a star system. Interplanetary travel is carried out by drop ships, vessels that attach themselves to the jump ship until arrival at the jump point. Most of the jump ships currently in service are already centuries old, because the successor lords are unable to construct many new ones each year. For this reason, there is an unspoken agreement even among these bitter enemies to leave one another's jump ships alone. Drop ship. Because jump ships generally remain at a considerable distance from a star system's inhabited worlds, drop ships were developed for interplanetary travel. A drop ship attaches to hard points on the jump ship and will later be dropped from the parent vessel after entry into a system. Drop ships are highly maneuverable, well armed, and sufficiently aerodynamic to take off from and land on a planetary surface. LRM. LRM is an abbreviation for Long Range Missile, an indirect fire missile with a high explosive warhead. New Avalon Institute of Science, or NAIS. In 3015, Prince Hans Davion decreed the construction of a new university on New Avalon, planetary capital of the Federated Suns. Known as the New Avalon Institute of Science, or NAIS, its purpose is to recover the lost technologies and knowledge of the past. Both House Kurita and House Marek have followed with their own universities, but neither is as well bankrolled or staffed as the NAIS. PPC. PPC is the abbreviation for Particle Projection Cannon, a magnetic accelerator firing high-energy protons or ion bolts, causing damage both through impact and high temperature. PPCs are among the most effective weapons available to battle mechs. They also overheat like a brother trucker. SRM. SRM is the abbreviation for Short Range Missiles, direct trajectory missiles with high explosive or armor-piercing explosive warheads. Star League. In 2571, the Star League was formed in an attempt to peacefully ally the major star systems inhabited by the human race after it had taken to the stars. The League continued and prospered for almost 200 years, until the succession wars broke out in the late 28th century. The League was eventually destroyed when the ruling body known as the High Council disbanded in the midst of a struggle for power. Each of the Council Lords then declared himself First Lord of the Star League, and within months, war had engulfed the inner sphere. These centuries of continuous war are now known simply as the Succession Wars, and continue to the present day. As a result, much of the technology that had brought mankind to its highest level of advancement has been destroyed, lost, or forgotten. Successor Lords. Each of the 5 successor states is ruled by a family descended from one of the original Council Lords of the old Star League. All 5 Royal House Lords claim the title of First Lord, and they have been at each other's throats since the beginning of the succession wars in the late 28th century. Their battleground is the vast inner sphere, which is composed of all the star systems once occupied by the Star League member states. And then we have an about the author, which is done up as kind of a data file. About the author. Comstar ROM Division, Langley, North America, Terra, 27 November 3050. Security Alert Advisory. Subject: Michael A. Stackpole. Recap: On 2 August 3030, Stackpole was the subject of an alert as a result of his escape from our Phoenix Re-Education Center. At the time, the subject claimed to have been born in the 20th century and raised in Vermont, where he took a degree in history from the University of Vermont in 1979. After that, he moved to Arizona and began a career as a game designer. While our researches did uncover records of such an individual, and we were able to confirm that he worked for companies such as Flying Buffalo Incorporated, FASA Corporation, TSR Incorporated, Hero Games, West End Games, Electronic Arts, and Interplay Productions, we cannot accept the conclusion that these two individuals are one in the same. That would make him 1,093 years old, though he doesn't look a day over 31. Our experts deny that a regimen of Szechuan food and indoor soccer would grant that sort of longevity. Recent sighting. Through the late 30s, we had sightings in the Lyran Commonwealth, mainly on Ark Royal and Nusakan, but after a confirmed sighting at Archon Katrina Steiner's funeral, the subject vanished. We believe he has resurfaced. We obtained a voice print match between his voice and that of a request for recharge clearance on a jump ship chartered by Wolf's Dragoons. The match came on 25 November, and the ship is believed to have been carrying Natasha Kerensky on a mission whose purpose we have not been able to discern. Conclusion. Given the subject's past propensity for writing, we suspect he is preparing another multi-volume work concerning the history of the successor states. The Primus found his previous revelations about Comstar vexatious, and has not rescinded the 3030 death order. Under no circumstances is he to be allowed to reach the clans. And that is Lethal Heritage by Michael A. Stackpole. Okay, so let's see if we can find something on pre-Word of Blake, Blakeism. Let's go with... Here we go, Jerome Blake. Let's go with Jerome Blake. Let's just do a quick rundown and see if I can find something from there. Do we have a... Yeah. We'll just do a quick rundown of Jerome Blake and his legacy here. Jerome Blake, and this is being ripped straight from Sarna.net, which is a information hub for all things BattleTech. I'll post a link. So this will give some idea of what's going on that Comstar is up to, the background there. Jerome Blake, known as the Blessed Founder or Blessed Blake by his followers, founded Comstar and seized control of Terra in its name in 2788, in the interests of preserving Star League technology and maintaining neutral communications for the Inner Sphere. History. Early life. Blake was born in Galesburg, a small town in North America. Very early on, the child prodigy expressed an interest in engineering and subsequently became a loner of sorts, a social introvert, as he spent much of his time studying, ultimately coming to the decision to specialize in hyperpulse mathematics and physics. Blake graduated from the University of Lambrecht in 2755 when he was only 16 years old. Blake would eventually join HPG personnel provider Starlight Broadcasting Limited and would be placed on permanent assignment to the Star League's Department of Communications. Immediately prior to the Amaris coup, Blake had risen to the post of lead operations officer for the Class A station on the Terran hegemony world of Oliver. The Star League's head technician. In 2766, Blake was in the Free Worlds League on holiday as Stefan Amaris launched his coup against the Star League, luckily avoiding capture by Amaris forces. Afterwards, as the highest-ranking technician of the few qualified technicians left, he volunteered to the Star League Defense Force to assist them. General Alexander Kerensky assigning Blake and his handful of technicians underneath him to devise a method for utilizing the remaining Class B HPG stations of the Inner Sphere not under Amaris's control. During the SLDF's Rim Worlds campaign, he established a makeshift prime circuit using the HPGs that Amaris did not control, and these became the main method of communication for the SLDF and the Great Houses. An HPG is a hyperpulse generator. It's a thingus. It does stuff. It's a communications node. During Kerensky's campaign approaching Terra, Blake volunteered his technicians and himself to lead the teams that re-established communications in recaptured HPG stations, which allowed the SLDF to manage their forces more easily during the offensive. This was not without risk. During the recapture of the Dierdre HPG station, Amaris's forces broke through the SLDF lines and fired on the station, killing 3 technicians, while Blake received a serious wound to the head. His cognitive ability was not impaired, but in his later life he would lapse into short comas, presumably due to these injuries. Showing his respect for Blake, Kerensky had him treated aboard the McKenna's Pride, the flagship of the SLDF. Now for the important bit. Founding of Comstar. After the liberation of Terra and the defeat of Amaris forces, Blake concentrated again on the task of restoring general communications in the Inner Sphere. With the Unity City HPG virtually a complete loss, Blake restarted construction of the larger Hilton Head HPG complex, which had been overlooked by Amaris forces due to the fact that the construction effort had been abandoned, and the materials carefully concealed when the coup began. The Hilton Head complex would turn Terra into the truest center of the HPG network once again. On the back of his skill and reputation for integrity, on October 10, 2780, Nicoletta Calderon nominated him for the position of Minister of Communications of the Star League. Blake himself was totally unaware that he had been nominated, overseeing the installation of Hilton Head's primary fusion reactor at the time. It was quickly agreed upon by the High Council. Subsequently, General Kerensky was stripped of his title as Protector of the Realm, and the House leaders dissolved the High Council. While he attempted to focus purely on restoring the HPG network, as the only minister of the Star League, Blake soon found himself the de facto leader of the reconstruction efforts for the entire Terran hegemony. With the Department of Communications increasingly pushed into the role of the informal government of the shattered hegemony, Blake would continually and fruitlessly press the Council Lords to name a formal successor, the House Lords too busy preparing for war and directing Blake to just do what he saw fit. The utter collapse of the Terran hegemony and the Star League seemed assured when Blake privately met Alexander Kerensky and his son Nicholas at the SLDF's post-coup headquarters of New Earth on November 2nd, 2783. On world to oversee the final repairs to the New Earth HPG and relief efforts for a dozen nearby worlds following the completion of Hilton Head, Blake thanked Kerensky for effectively drawing away Great House's notice and allowing his reconstruction efforts to succeed along with his sorrow over the increasing pace of SLDF defections to those houses. Quoting Russian philosopher Alexander Pushkin on the limits of unreturned loyalty, Kerensky would insist he had a solution, one Blake's assistance would be vital to support. With Blake reluctantly swearing to never divulge the contents of the meeting, Kerensky revealed his refusal to seize the throne of the Star League or to try and defend the hegemony from Great House attack in favor of a third option: Exodus. While Jerome was furious upon learning Kerensky's intentions, angrily telling the general that conservatively billions in the hegemony and inner sphere would now die if he enacted his plan, Kerensky insisted it was the only way to avoid it becoming 100 billion, and that the sacrifice of his reputation was a small price to pay to ensure that. His attempts to sway Kerensky into staying failed. Oh, that's a comma, not a period. His attempts to sway Kerensky into staying failed. Blake agreed to help the general to keep the secret of the operation, and was able to convince the former general to ask some of those troops who declined to join Operation Exodus to assist the department's reconstruction efforts. Kerensky able to persuade some 17 divisions and 14 independent regiments to aid Blake. Holding back these troops as a last resort, Blake continued to focus on the reconstruction of the HPG network, most notably achieving the re-establishment of the First Circuit HPGs of New Earth: Barnard, Alpha Centauri, Bryant, Alpha C, Bryant, Procyon, and Dierdre, 3 days after the Exodus. Quickly forming a decision-making council for the department made up of chief administrators of those HPGs, among the first things the First Circuit agreed upon was Conrad Toyama of the Dierdre Station's suggestion to rename the organization Comstar. The renamed Comstar would continue to rebuild Terra and the shattered worlds of the hegemony along with the HPG network for the next 2 years. But despite Blake's amazing efforts, the growing storm clouds of war hung over all Comstar had achieved, his deepest fear that the House Lord's lust for power would destroy everything he'd spent so long rebuilding. Operation Silver Shield. Giving increasing thought on how to protect Terra and the HPG network, in a secret meeting with the First Circuit in the winter of 2786, Blake outlined Operation Silver Shield. Blake's daring plan had 3 key parts: persuading the leaders of the great houses to agree to the neutrality of Comstar, its facilities and personnel, formalizing the Comstar letter of credit as a common currency for exchange with all great houses for Comstar's service, and finally seizing Terra and as many of the surrounding worlds of the hegemony as possible in the name of Comstar. The audacity of Blake's plan shocked the First Circuit, the members of the body quickly becoming divided between militant members who felt it didn't go far enough and those who hoped that a chance for peace remained. Ultimately, Blake persuaded all members of the highly skeptical body to back his plan if his negotiations with House Lords to secure Comstar's neutrality proved successful. Showing a high degree of diplomatic tact as well as a willingness to bend the truth to serve his case, Blake made a historic tour of the Inner Sphere in 2787, convincing each House Lord in turn to sign the Communications Protocol of 2787, claiming that theirs was the last signature and that all others had already agreed. Amazed by his successes, the First Circuit now enthusiastically offered their full support to the remainder of Silver Shield. Unfortunately, by the time Blake had returned to Terra, open warfare had already begun to break out, forcing him to revise the third military portion of Silver Shield, focusing on the capture of Terra alone and stripping the surrounding worlds of all useful materiel and resources ahead of the House Lords. On 25 June 2788, at 0600 TST, which is, I don't know, something standard time, Terra synchronized time, Comstar shut down all HPG transmitters. General Lauren Hayes' 8 divisions, masquerading as mercenaries supposedly hired by Blake, successfully defeated the House and former SLDF units which opposed Blake's sudden militant response. A persistent legend holds that Blake participated in the campaign on Terra, piloting an Ostrock. Which is what? It's some kind of... Is it a medium mech? It's a heavy mech that I don't actually recognize off the top of my noggin. Could be because it's an older one and I don't recognize all of those. That's new art, though. Anyway, it's a heavy mech. After 72 hours, the HPG network resumed transmission, broadcasting scenes of the military takeover of Terra, the entire operation filmed and documented per the order of Blake and the First Circuit. The footage intended to impress upon the House Lords the high cost to challenge Comstar's ownership of Terra. Blake would also transmit a short message to the entire Inner Sphere.
People of the former Star League, I am Jerome Blake, Prime Administrator of Comstar. As of now, 0900 hours Terran Standard Time, military forces under my direct command have seized control of the Sol Star System. Comstar is now officially in control of Terra and all former Star League facilities remaining in the system. From this time forward, I proclaim Terra and the entire Sol system as neutral under the protection of Comstar, under the terms and conditions of the Communications Protocol of 2787. As the previous broadcast has made clear, Comstar has sufficient military force to defend the homeworld of mankind from any aggressor. Our goals are peaceful,
We seek unity and prosperity of mankind. This action was taken to save life in the devastating war that is unfolding. Comstar will continue to offer its communication services to all member states, as long as the Sol system and our neutrality are honored. Jerome Blake, 28 June 2788. Mercenary Review Board. Jerome Blake spent most of his life as a technician and administrator, but showed a natural talent as a political economist. Initially, Comstar was operating in the red because of their massive hegemony reconstruction projects, running high debts with each of the 5 houses, but as the First Succession War raged, they managed to pay all the debt, and, in 2802, began earning profits. One of the longest-lasting branches of Comstar founded by Blake was the Mercenary Review Board. Developed as a means to monitor and control mercenary contracts, ironically it wasn't formed by Blake's vision, but rather from a request of coordinator Minoru Kurita, who mentioned a betrayal of a mercenary group and suggested to Comstar to create a neutral policing agency. Only a week later, Blake announced the creation of that entity. Since then, Comstar's board has negotiated the contracts and managed the money, collecting a commission of less than 5%. Comstar also alerted other potential employers to rogue unit actions. The new board was also tasked with investigating any alleged crimes of mercenary units. The board survived 300 years until Operation Scorpion, which happens around the clan invasion, as I recall. It's a power play. I'm not going to get into it because it might be spoilers for a subsequent novel. Creation of ROM, or ROM. The spring of 2811 brought the first real threat to Comstar when Chancellor Ilsa Liao sought to restore her realm's technological base by bribing Comstar technicians to defect. Shortly after the first attempt, a group of terrorists attempted to seize control of an HPG station on the Capellan world of Nanking. It would have succeeded if not for the brave efforts of the station's technicians. The Capellan government denied any involvement, but First Circuit's investigation concluded that it was the Capellan government who had set the terrorists as part of a plan to gain control of all HPG stations in the Confederation. Despite lacking conclusive evidence of Capellan involvement, Blake proposed the creation of a covert security force to protect Comstar's HPG network from both inside and outside threats. This motion was successful and led to the creation of ROM. The new group reported directly to the Prime Administrator, and after just a year, ROM was fully activated, and Blake ordered ROM to begin counterintelligence operations in the Confederation. After the spring of 2812, when ROM members discovered a Confederation plan to kill Robin Bishop, then Chief Administrator of Bryant HPG, Blake ordered ROM to strike first and kill the Capellan assassins before they could carry out their plans. All of the assassins were dead within 2 days. Blake reinforced this message with another direct address to Ilsa Liao, pointing out that Comstar now had the means to defend against any and all threats. The Chancellor ordered the Maskirovka to cease all plans to attack Comstar. Does this say? Oh, I just checked on ROM to see what it stands for. The origin of the acronym is unclear. It might describe the 3 core Comstar branches dealing with intelligence: Rho, Omicron, and Mu. So it is just always ROM or ROM. All right. And now, the death and legacy of Jerome Blake. Jerome Blake's leadership of Comstar lasted 31 years, and he defined the philosophy, operations, and structure of Comstar. However, in his later years, Blake suffered health issues related to his injuries sustained on Dierdre. He fell ill during a First Circuit meeting in May 2819, but his colleagues were not too concerned at the time, as he apparently recovered fairly quickly. However, later that month he collapsed again, and his condition was determined to be a rare genetic disorder, one that would ultimately prove fatal. He spent the rest of his days being visited by the First Circuit. The last to visit was Conrad Toyama, and during this visit, Blake lapsed into coma. During their final meeting, Blake laid out his plan to convert Comstar into a religion, to the initial horror of Toyama, but was quickly able to convince Toyama of the value of his plan, saying that for the organization to outlast its founding autocrat, it needed to transform into a religion. Following Blake's death, Conrad Toyama launched into Blake's plan to turn the organization's founder into a saintly martyr. Blake's will stipulated that his body be incinerated and his ashes scattered over the court of the Star League in Unity City. But Toyama overruled it and had his body preserved and placed on display at Hilton Head. The body, the word of Blake's most holy relic, was preserved for centuries, until it was probably incinerated when Hilton Head was blown up by several nukes during Operation Scour in 3077. Oh. Philosophical and/or political views. Due to the heavy rewriting or even hiding of Blake's writings, it is very difficult to clear the facts about him, but it is clear that his decisions, though cold, were very successful in the business side. Seems like dodgy English, but whatever, it's a wiki. His personality was described as socially awkward and reserved, a real workaholic. Blake was more businessman than politician, but his decision to concentrate the rebuilding efforts in the inner sphere worlds probably exaggerated the state of decline in the periphery. The area effectively turned from a marginal but developed area into the barrens which it has become. Some said that was because he blamed the periphery's people for the Amaris coup and felt a deep distaste for the periphery, while another potential explanation was his overwhelming focus on restoring the First Circuit of the HPG, leading him to spend the vast majority of his time and resources on rebuilding the worlds of the Terran hegemony. He personally abhorred violence, but saw the need for a swift and brutal security force that could operate to safeguard Comstar interests, hence his founding of ROM and banning of outsiders joining them, showing that he was not above harsh measures in his attempts to save the HPG and preserve as much of the Star League technology as possible. His intention to preserve mankind's knowledge was a project that involved preventing it from falling into the House Lord hands as much as to record it. In fact, it was probably for that what? In fact, it was probably for that he began the isolationism so characteristic of Comstar. Blake's intentions appear to have been idealistic, creating a nexus between all former inner sphere states and preserving the advanced knowledge of the Star League, but they became corrupted soon after his death. Blake didn't create any of the religious or mystical trappings which Comstar later adopted, but he laid the foundation of many of its structures and policies. There's a last paragraph here, but it is going to probably be spoilers for a later volume, so I'm not going to touch it. Nor am I going to touch on the word of Blake, which this also did not talk about. The word of Blake is something that happens right at the end of, probably at the end of this trilogy we're reading, which is kind of the next major event in the Battletech universe at the time. I forget in real time when it was introduced. Exactly. I forget when the clan invasion was. I want to say it was the early 90s. Might have been the late 80s, though. It's been a minute. Actually, it's pretty easy to find out. When was this book written? Because it would sync pretty well with that. This is from 89, so it would have been like, the Word of Blake stuff would have been like mid-90s, I think. That kind of meshes with what I remember, but it's so long that I can't really. So that tells you about Jerome Blake, the guy who is behind Blakeism, that the Comstar people that we've had interactions with believe in rather fervently. Anyway, with that, I will leave you all to it. I don't know what I'll do next week. We'll figure it out. This week, we've got a last installment of Merchanter's Luck by C.J. Cherry and a last installment of Death's End by Shixin Liu. So we have some things to look forward to this week. I have not gotten my playlists updated. I will do that after this week. They will be all set and ready to go. It's a bit more convenient that way, so I don't have to do it twice to get them updated with the final installments installed. Anyway, with that, I'll see you all later. Stay safe, stay sane, be decent to each other, and I'll see or hear or see you all next time. Until further notice, toodaloo.